Here today. Thanks for coming out in the snow and slush, and thank you to the students of Cooper Union and to the organizers of NEO New York, make sure my voice is projecting, for inviting me. You'll notice behind me that I have tabs prepared for all of my talking points today, but you can't imagine how much listening to the white noise app on my iPhone was required to force myself to concentrate, to stay off of Facebook and Twitter and Tumblr, etc., and to organize these thoughts that I'm going to share. I'd like to first say I greatly respect the philosophy of the organizers of NEO New York in offering this platform for students to learn and create based off their achievement and effort rather than their economic background. My own life has involved a bit of metaphorical time and space travel, as I am the first in my family to finish 4 years of college and to earn a terminal degree, an MFA. My grandparents from the Appalachian Mountains didn't have the opportunity to finish their educations beyond the 8th grade. And as a child, sitting on a porch with my relatives singing mountain ballads, or even watching my dad beginning to plug into the early opportunities of a more populous tech culture, I couldn't imagine the world I inhabit today. And there's a little for better or for worse than that, like all things. Today, the title of my talk is Cogency in the Imaginarium. Let me try that again. Cogency in the Imaginarium. Few syllables there. Or What a Picture's Worth. Wherein I'd like to discuss topics that I think are relevant to our 21st century creative lives. About the image behind me. Approximately 40,800 years ago, Neanderthals decided to make their marks on the walls of a cave called Il Castillo in northern Spain. And in 1974, which now seems like the Stone Age, one of the first Hello World programs was written by Brian Kernighan. Whether to verify our own existence or to verify that our creations are operating properly, self-expression has been an impulse within us for millennia. But as much as we have been creators, we have equally been consumers of images, text, and information throughout history. And today we have a plethora of data visualization to indicate how much we generate and consume. The image to the left from 2010, is that cut off? No, it's okay. Indicates that our total US data consumption in one day is 3.6 zettabytes, or 1 billion trillion bytes of information. The image to the right illustrates the massive amount of information we are creating each day. And below it are numerous other visualizations of how steep the increase in our data consumption is, how many apps we use, when we use them, and what that represents in our personhood. It's all fascinating and simultaneously daunting to process. So let's enter the realm of the Imaginarium and extrude something else from these visualizations. For example, the first image that popped into my head when I thought about media consumption was eyes with teeth, not flowcharts. Lo and behold, someone else in the metaverse envisioned this too, and a quick Google search returned the literal image that I imagined. An ears with teeth search returned more discursive results. The eye on the ass cheek is a favorite. Now, the logical next search for me was Bruce Naumann's A Rose Has No Teeth from 1966. It's a piece that represents the artist's lifelong practice of exploring the potentiality for communication to fail, both through language and image. This image questions our assumptions about what we know or expect from meaning, an endeavor I've always found healthy in art. And so, outside of Photoshop, our eyes and ears may have no teeth, nor a rose, yet that is. But there are modifications artists are making to themselves, or ways they are tracking their own data, or quantifying emotional data that creates a more compelling vision than a chart of percentages of how we can consume, manipulate, and generate data and media. For example, artist Anthony Antonellis who had an RFID, radio frequency identification chip, recently implanted in his hand. The technology, usually used for privacy, he's using for a public purpose to distribute artwork. And I'll add, it's compelling in its way to subvert the white box gallery system. Install a gallery in your own flesh and micro-curate shows of JPEGs, GIFs, and ASCII art. Another example of a data self artist is Lori Frick, and I'm really excited that she's here today, who tracks her life with various applications and then uses these metrics to create elaborate handmade works and brilliantly patterned installations. Inspired by neuroscience, Lori uses her collections of personal data and transposes them to express deeper understandings of the nature of pattern and of the mind. Or there's the artist Luc Dubois, who after a breakup joined 21 different online dating sites and inevitably produced a work out of the process. He downloaded 19 million profiles of single Americans from across the country, and he created a map that we're not really familiar with, one not based on geography, population, or income, but based on the lexicon of American romance. In the image behind me, you're seeing a map of the word shy and how it is used in dating profiles across U.S. congressional districts, divided by gender. There are maps of the sexy, the bored, the cynical, and the optimistic too. In preparing for this talk, I spoke with several art students or recent graduates about their outlook on successful careers in the arts or creative fields. One young artist used the expression beige work to describe with exasperation much of the work that seems to get play in many major galleries. Work she described as safe and devoid of any content that would interfere with it looking good in a collector's elegant living room. As a result, many of these young artists fear, because they're not interested in making this kind of work, fear that a career in the arts will be much more of a struggle for them. I don't want to waste time on discussing specific examples of work I would describe as beige in the pejorative sense. And instead, I want to focus on artists and collaborative groups who produce work that involves a different set of aesthetics and concerns. I couldn't resist mentioning Beige Programming Ensemble, and you'll see that at the bottom, an art collective who made electronic media-inspired work in the late 90s and early 2000s. Their work certainly conjures different notions about the word beige and what it can imply. And then there's the work of Carrie Mae Weems, a recent MacArthur Genius Grant winner who has a 30-year survey of her work currently on view at the Guggenheim Museum. Her text-based, fabric, photo, video, and digital works have for decades invited contemplation of and challenged assumptions about race, gender, and class. And deservedly, she is receiving accolades for not being a safe artist. Equally inspiring for a whole different set of reasons is Cloak.org. It's a Tumblr-blazed art project where a digital landfill meets the exquisite corpse. Conceived and run by Carlos Saez and Claudia Mate, artists from around the world have participated and added to this giant scrolling Tumblr. It is a space, in the words of Carlos, to make art free from economic and logistic restrictions. So, along that line of thought, meaning an art practice that's free, or at least freer from restrictions, I've been thinking a lot about what that means in relation to self-expression in an ever increasingly technologized world. So synonyms for free are unimpeded, unhampered, open, clear. And following that path, we get to uncensored, unedited, unfiltered. So, unfiltered, a word whose first definition on Dictionary.com is reality-based. Now, if you're a designer or a digital artist like myself, or studying these things, you probably have used some filters in the literal sense, digital filters. And even if you're only an active Instagram user, you're often applying filters to the images you share with others. Filtering an overlay, as an overlay on an image can be both similar to and different from the psychological strainer one may pour her consciousness through before she shares it with the world. In a world, a reality now, mind you, where our relationship to virtual and real life increasingly becomes more porous every day, there is a new complexity to what unfiltered and filtered means. Think of Kanye West, for example, a personality entirely filtered and unfiltered simultaneously. And where there are filters, there's always going to be something for us to call surreal. My assumption has always been that the developers of Photoshop and various other imaging manipulation softwares owe a great deal to the visions of early 20th century artists like Salvador Dali, Dorothea Tanning, and Rene Magritte. In the past 20 years, there have been millions upon millions of images warped, bodies reassembled, and objects melted and filtered in ways that resemble the works and sometimes the aims of early surrealists to resolve the previously contradictory conditions of dreams and reality. Often, though, art of this nature found online, on blogs and Tumblr feeds, is dismissed as kind of a naive net surrealism that is far too ubiquitous and lacking in criticality to be taken seriously. So it's interesting then to find movements emerging online that aim to contextualize internet surrealism, or internet surrealism, such as Pains. So this is post-Abbott internet surrealism. And on Know Your Meme, Pains is described as developing as a reaction against the internet vintage conceptual art scene that followed with Instagram Core and Tumblr Wave. And it is a representation of a return to portraying compressed computer graphics, such as the meme, in a rough and violently emotional way. Now, Pains may be a meme that has come and gone. That post is from 2012. But it indicates to me that artists are continually looking for ways to freshly explore the familiar and make it unfamiliar. So, this is a recent piece that I did. It's titled The Garden of Emoji Delights. And it's quite obviously a mashup of Bosch and emoji. And recently in an essay that I actually wrote for Neo New York, I shared my thoughts and perceptions on the term visual thinking. While I was writing the essay, I grew frustrated with some of the examples of visual thinking I was finding online, and so I went to bed to just dream it off. I then documented fragments of my dream that night and wrote, I quote myself now, "Dream vision is fascinating to me because it so closely resembles how I see and process information. In a culture where more and more of our identities are expressed as logical data sets that form patterns easily analyzed and graphed, I'm drawn to the kind of thing we do in pre-conscious states or in headspaces where we're not trying to strictly illustrate, explain, translate, or categorize through visualization. In alternate perceptual spaces, when we tap into the intuitive, uncodified grammar of vision, less mundane and more idiosyncratic images or combinations of images can emerge." Now, since writing this, I've asked others in my social networks about their dreams. If they dream more in first person, for example, or third person, or if they had emoji dreams. I had one recently. I received numerous replies, as we are still fascinated and puzzled by our dreams and what they may represent. In the early part of the 20th century, people remembered their dreams in black and white. And I think that's because black and white television and movies, right? Why wouldn't game perspectives and emoji be in our dreams today? Now, although this Bosch emoji mashup is not the product of a personal dream recollection, it is imbued with some of the absurdity I often encounter in my dreams and try to maintain in my art practice. Pay attention, motherfuckers! Sorry, I'm not referring to you guys. Instead, I'm quoting another work by Bruce Nauman, a work from 1973. "Your attention is now part of a global economy, and everyone wants it. From media corporations to financial institutions to your friend launching an app or a Tumblr. An iPhone case with an artwork by Barbara Kruger is to your left. And it implores you to call, cool, meet, like, and love me, me, me. And as we look at ourselves in the mirror camera of our iPhones, we can read the reversed words of Bruce Nauman quite clearly. He is explicitly ordering us to do what everyone is tacitly suggesting that we do. He He is explicitly ordering us to do what we each are suggesting to others to do. Pay attention to me. We are all implicated in this economy. In 1997, Michael Goldhaber, in an article in Wired, declared that our information economy was shifting to an attention economy. And I quote, "As the net becomes an increasingly strong presence in the overall economy, the flow of attention will not only anticipate the flow of money, but eventually will replace it altogether." And he continues, "The key point about the various forms and avenues of attention is that while each want it to some extent, it does not arrive in equal measure. This explains why many of us are working harder and harder to get some, and why we eagerly latch on to technologies such as the internet and the web. Cyberspace affords new opportunities for capturing attention that might otherwise dissipate. It promises nearly everyone a chance at attention from millions, the potential to be noticed by the largest possible audience, or by an audience of peers whose attention is what we value most. But the net also ups the ante, increasing the relentless pressure to get some fraction of this limited resource. And at the same time, it generates ever greater demands on each of us to pay what scarce attention we can to others." So 17 years after Goldhaber wrote those words, 10 years after Facebook launched, 40,000 years after pigments were used to trace a hand on a cave wall to call attention to its owner, most of us find ourselves with smartphones in hand, or iPads, and numerous social network accounts active, trying to garner as many likes, favorites, and reblogs as we can. We already know that only 1% is really reaping serious financial benefit from any of this, but attention nonetheless represents power, even in microfame internet proportions. This is the world in which we live. And to be honest, I'm usually suspicious of a sepia-tinted nostalgia for good old days. In human history, it's hard for me to imagine a single being or group of beings completely satisfied with their lives at any one point. Now, in 1991, Wim Wenders directed a film entitled Until the End of the World, that image right there on the far right. Near the end of the film, and the director's cut is 6 hours, so getting to the end takes a while, a scientist discovers a way to record human dreams. Now, what happens with this technology? The main characters in the film become addicted to watching their own dreams over and over again on a black box just a bit larger than a smartphone. They stop paying attention to their loved ones, to the entire world, and just become wrapped up in the dreams their little black box provides. So as much as I encourage myself and others to be flexible, open, and adaptive to the changes, growths, mutations, and evolutions in all facets of our lives, on a personal, public, community, and global level, the words of Howard Renegold in his online book, Virtual Community, resonate. Quote, "Rule number 1, is to pay attention. Rule number 2 might be, attention is a limited resource, so pay attention to where you pay attention." Now, beyond abstract notions of what the attention economy can provide for us in terms of approbation and attention, there are more concrete economic concerns many artists or students face. For example, massive student loan debt, or dealing with creditors after maxing out all your cards in efforts to manifest your vision. Author Dorothy Allison gets it when she says, quote, "Behind my carefully buttoned collar is my nakedness, the struggle to find clean food, clothes, meaning, and money." So, I'd like to share with you part of a recent post by Ed Winkleman. He runs a gallery in Chelsea called Winkleman Gallery, and has kept an active blog for about 10 years now. And so he talks about the critical difference between a rock star and an art star. And there's Karen O, remember Art Star? A long time ago, she sang that. So, he says, "There is also another conversation I had that involved a young person who decided to get their MFA, get a gallery, make a ton of money, and then, once rich, set off to do what they really wanted to do with their lives. This completely absurd life plan, seriously, if money is a prerequisite to the freedom to do what you want to with your life, get your MBA, not your MFA." And it struck me, though, as part of why a younger visual artist might approach an exhibition in a major gallery less seriously. They're not taking it seriously. So indeed, this narrative, being an artist equals being a rock star equals money for nothing and your chicks or dudes for free, is worming its way into mythology and setting a wide range of wildly unrealistic expectations. I'm not worried about the rock star wannabes who had their fantasies dashed upon the rocks of real life. Silly goals meet silly ends. But for the BFA students out there debating whether or not to invest in an MFA, I think the industry as a whole owes them a much more realistic set of expectations, end quote. And so now I've got a few more points I'd like to make, and I'm realizing I need to speed up to make them. So the next one is speed. I'll rely again on some of the quotes of others to give you a sense of how our relationship to speed has changed in the eyes of critical thinkers over the past 30 years. Marshall McLuhan wrote an article, Living at the Speed of Light, in 1980. In the 80s, there is a general awareness, I'm quoting now, that the technology game is out of control and that perhaps man was not intended to live at the speed of light. Excessive speed of change isolates already fragmented individuals, and the accelerated process of adaptation takes too much vitality out of communities. Now, by 1998, Jeremy Miller and Michelle Schwartz in Speed Visions of an Accelerated Age seemed to be more circumspect about it all. And like Renegold, who suggested we pay attention to where we pay attention, they suggest that we empower ourselves by controlling a condition so that it does not control us. So they say to possess speed is to be modern. To control speed rather than to be controlled by it is perhaps the most important form of contemporary power. By 2013, we reach a new vision of speed in Brad Trammell's Athletic Aesthetics. For the New Inquiry, Trammell writes, for athletes, hard to say that word, the point of their work is not only what it expresses, but the speed at which it's expressed. The ideal presentation of their work is the constant broadcast. Now, I'm running out of time, so within the speed, time, distance equation, I will jump to distance. No matter how fast our speed, how constant our broadcast, there will always be those who are faster than us. In 2010, I ran the New York City Marathon. Running 26.2 miles in one day felt like quite an accomplishment. And although I'm proud enough of the speed at which I ran that day, going the distance really made a bigger impact on my life. The images projected to the left are from a piece I made subsequent to running the marathon, where I stage a race between IRL, in real life me, and URL me, my second life avatar. A manifestation of me and me, going the distance, driving each other forward, maintaining both speed and endurance. And to the right are some tweets from the Twitter project at www.text1980 through 94. A description of the project states that 1980 through 1994 represent the final years of a much smaller, non-commercial and text-dominated internet. The users of this era were not only programmers, physicists, and university residents, they were also tinkerers, early adopters, whiz kids, and nerds. Their conversations and documents, valiantly preserved by digital archivists, are fractured across numerous services. And www.text digs deep and resurrects the voices of these digital pioneers as unedited, compelling, and insightful 140-character excerpts. So, as important as it is for us to maintain, if not even increase our speed in response to the fast creative culture in which we all coexist, I find that many of my mentors also have known how to pace themselves and build the endurance that has fortified them for a life of creativity. And finally, selfies, selflessies. Jerry Saltz, an art critic who certainly has gone the distance in the New York art world over the years, weighed in recently on selfies. And I agree with what he has to say. Quote, we live in the age of the selfie, a fast self-portrait made with a smartphone's camera and immediately distributed and inscribed into a network. It's an instant visual communication of where we are, what we're doing, who we think we are, and who we think is watching. Selfies have changed aspects of social interaction, body language, self-awareness, privacy, and humor, altering temporality, irony, and public behavior. It's become a new visual genre, a type of self-portraiture formerly distinct from all others in history. Selfies have their own structural autonomy. This is a very big deal for art. End quote. Of course, for every critic who appreciates a selfie, there's another who judges selfies as shallow and empty acts of narcissism. In response to those criticisms, I looked up selflessy, hashtag selflessy, and I wasn't surprised to find it trending as a topic, but certainly not one without irony. For example, the tweet, hashtag selflessy, pictures you take of yourself doing good in the world that you share online. Of course, sharing them makes you an a-hole. And so the very idea of aggrandizing oneself as selfless becomes as narcissistic an act as just taking off your shirt and showing your six-pack abs, if you have them, to everyone. We are a strange and complicated species, and our creative power resides in our ability to think beyond binaries. As much as we are expressed as data in so many ones and zeros, we think, feel, exist, and manifest our creativity in the fractional widths between binary logic. And today, more than ever before in history, we realize that none of this do we do alone. Charles Horton Cooley, in the iPhone there, got this over 100 years ago when he wrote, "Social consciousness or awareness of society is inseparable from self-consciousness because we can hardly think of ourselves excepting with reference to a social group of some sort, or of the group except with references to ourselves." So I'll conclude with this. How we perform our creativity in the 21st century and in relationship to technology and a more accessible collective conscience is certainly different than any other era in history. But the drive to leave a mark, get attention, find meaning, and share it with others was embedded in the psyche of our species long, long ago. Our visual thinking may include the efficient expression of data, but I hope and believe it will never lose the illogical magic of our imaginations. And now, logging off. Thanks.